Welcome to this video. This is the review video of this week of themed openings, and it was the King's Fianchetto week. So I did Fianchetto, my King's Bishop, in all of the games, usually starting with G3 or G6 and then Bishop G2 next move. Let's have a look at how this went. In terms of rating, it was an okay week. It was about even. I started with about 2,400 and finished like that. Results were okay, but well, the results, as you know, in Blitz are not always related to the opening results. So let's just have a review and also by that get a feel for those kind of openings, what is going on there. I'm going to start out with white, and well, as I said, I started G3 basically in all games, and we had a wide variety of things that came from this, simply because it is highly transpositional. G3 in itself is not let's say standalone opening. It's mostly a transpositional thing. There is something called the Benko opening, which is 1G3, but this is basically limited to things like, I had one game that went like this. I think it's one or two. Did I have two games like that? I think just the one game against Dr. Nunn. If I go now like D3, this would be really what is called the Benko opening, where we are talking about a reversed modern or reversed builds defense, which is really quite tame and not very ambitious. White playing like that is basically giving up any idea for an opening edge. You can do that, but it is not very inspiring. I tried C4 in one of the games here against Dr. Nunn, who played C6. Which is of course good. Black has a number of moves, and very often they transpose to other things. D4, for example, is very likely transposing to some kind of Reti opening, which let's say like D3 here and here, which could easily rise via Knight F3 on the first move and then D5, C4, D4. So like, let's say like this. Which is in effect a reversed Benoni. There are tons of those transpositions. In fact, here also Knight F6 is possible, which after C takes, Knight takes, is all of a sudden an English opening. So it's highly transpositional. In the game, Dr. Nunn went C6, which is also a main move really. And now I took and went D4, which I think is the best way to play for white. You should get some kind of play in the center, not just play D3 and be passive. Here black has two main options. He can take on D4 or play E4. He took, possible, but I thought E4 is more testing, and I checked it a little bit in my database. This is the more interesting move actually, gaining space and trying to blunt this bishop. White probably should do something like that, trying to attack the center pawn here on E4 and either force black to trade, which gives white a little bit development advantage. Center is a bit problematic here. Those squares here are a bit tricky, but it's good development. Or black can try to support that with F5, after which white has this kind of idea. Sometimes bishop G5 in case of Knight F6. Leads to interesting play. I don't like it particularly much for white, because black has a space advantage and I don't like to have a space disadvantage as white, which is I committed to play these openings for variety's sake, but it's nothing that I particularly like here. He took, however, on D4, and after that I think white has a decent position. Here the most testing continuation, however, is not what he played. He played Knight C6 or Knight F6. I need to look that up. It's not a huge difference. I think black should probably try to play with a check here, maybe, intending to return the pawn like that. This is very comparable to the Panov attack against the Caro-Kann, or the E4, C6, C4 line. Black is probably okay here, but this is not something that worries white too much. He can take here on D3, or white can even play for a sacrifice because he's so well developed. Black is making pawn moves all of the time. So this whole line seems to be okay actually for white, if you don't mind this type of position. I do mind it, but this is also a personal preference thing. In general, if you play the move 1g3 and they go e5, it is a very decent idea to not play bishop g2 in the first place, but to play c4 and transpose to the English opening, which would normally come up via c4, e5, g3. I think this is a very good idea, and probably objectively the move that lets white fight for the most here out of the opening. It's also quite logical to try to prevent the perfect pawn center with e4 and d4. Of course, that is not a mistake or anything. I mean, well, I played a couple of games with colors reversed, being a tempo down, and well, you can do that. But I think trying to go for an advantage, you better go c4 here. But I didn't want to transpose into pure English openings too much, just to keep it in character, let's say. In some games, 2 games, they went g6, yeah, which is quite popular. If the people Fianchetto themselves, yeah, they play the King's Indian or other Fianchetto type openings, they very often just copy what you do. And here we have a branch, parting of the ways. In one game I went e4, and in 2 games I played c4. So I got that quite a bit. e4 is interesting. Yeah, it looks a bit weird. Yeah, why would you block the bishop? But it prepares further occupation in the center, and possibly exactly the setup that I got. I had one game where black now went c5, which looks quite logical, and we got a Sicilian type of position now. Something like that is what we had. Went e6, I went castles, knight e7, c3. Yeah, this setup is quite interesting. It's very often called the big clamp. Don't know really where that comes from, but it's quite nice. I think this is something that I could easily imagine playing in a serious game like this. White is harmoniously developed. He's got good central control with those pawns. It looks a little bit like let's say, like a reversed Dutch defense in a way, where in the Dutch it would be black, but you get in e4, f4 this perfect pawn duo. And okay, black is not in terrible shape here, but that is certainly an interesting way to play, and you can easily get a nice position if black is playing some second-rate continuations. Yeah, in the game that I had, for example, he played far too slowly on the queen side, and with d4 and later e5, I got a very nice position. This setup, for example, also was used by Viktor Korchnoi in one of his World Championship games against Anatoly Karpov, winning a nice game. I think it was in the 1978 World Championship match on the Philippines. Not sure how Karpov played, but I think he also went for this black setup. And I think this is an interesting alternative to go with this e4 move here instead of c4. Black is not forced to play c5, of course. Yeah, he can also play something like, let's say, e5. He can just copy that, but white can try something similar. This can easily transpose into a kind of Vienna game, yeah, from e4, e5, knight c3. But that's an interesting offbeat way to play. Yeah? Later d3, f4. So why not? It's a possible opening. c4 I played 2 times, and both times they went for c5, going completely symmetrical. Yeah, here white's main continuation is knight f3, but I did not go for that. To be perfectly honest, I think that in this kind of situation, after knight f3, black doesn't have any particular problem with many moves. The main reason for that is that black has this very nice grip over d4, and white does not get to play d4 anytime soon. Of course, white is not worse, but it's not very aggressive, let's say, from white's point of view. He does not get in d4 early, and in fact, being, let's say, a tempo down in this symmetrical position, or let's say black sees white's move first, actually is a bit helpful, because, well, after knight f3 we know the knight is there, and now we can play accordingly. For example, e5 is very often better played when the knight is already committed to f3. So it's nothing I like particularly. It's an okay position for white, but it's nothing great. I went a3 here, and well, this is also not much to write home about, but it has a little bit of bite with a quick rook b1 and b4. I had, as mentioned, 2 games with that, and in both games black reacted with the a pawn. In one game they played a6, just being symmetrical. This is the main line, actually, which is, to be honest, a little bit boring. This is this thing. This is actually what deters me from going into that as white in serious games, because it's just really boring. It seems, however, that after knight f3, this extra tempo is giving white maybe a little bit of an advantage. It is very, very, it's not much, but you have some hope that something like this and knight e5, that you can do something with the tempo. It is very safe in any case. Yeah, if you're looking for a very safe line for white, this is certainly fitting the bill. After a6, there is very little that white can do besides this rook b1 b4 idea. Otherwise, a3 really didn't make much sense. a6 is the most solid move for black, but also, as I said, a little bit boring. On a3, black has other tries that are more interesting, or a little bit, let's say, more flexible and fighting. An interesting one, for example, is b6. This is what I have played myself, angling for a quick bishop b7, d6, queen d7, and then later e6, knight e7. So just, black has to start with b6 to get the queenside fianchetto in the first place. That's a bit more interesting from black's point of view. What the other guy did was a5. That's not very common, committing to that so early. Bit of an ugly move, yeah, because b5 is weakened. However, the position is fairly closed, and it is not really clear that white is coming up. White can come up with anything very dangerous. I went in this game, I went e3, and I thought that might be a good idea to have this set up, like with knight e2 castles. Of course, not bad, but I was surprised that e5 here, which I thought during the game isn't that great, is in fact quite okay. Black doesn't have any particular problem here. I thought this setup with knight on e2 would be a little bit better in comparison to a setup with knight f3, where you often go knight f3, e1, c2, e3, d5, yeah, takes a long while, and here you get in knight d5 immediately. But it turned out that, as it is in the game here, this is looking nice, but it's nothing special really. I ultimately got a good position, but that was not really due to the opening. I mean, I still think that this is a little bit better than the knight f3 e1 version of the whole opening, but still black is very solid here. He has relatively good, he can fight for d5 quite well, and it's not so easy for white to get anywhere. Pretty solid. A5 looks a bit crude, but it's not bad, it seems. What else did I get? G3 knight f6 was one game, of course, very flexible. Bishop g2 and g6. Yeah. Here white again has a pretty wide choice: c4, d4, some transpositional possibilities. I tried the move b3, which is a bit uncommon here, but it does not seem to be particularly bad. My opponent played bishop g7 after that, after which we got a position that normally comes up via the Reti opening. Yeah, like we had this. This is normally coming up via the Reti, knight d5, d5, c4, or knight f3, d5, g3, c6, c4, this kind of thing. It turned out that he played it just identical to how Dr. Nunn played against me recently. Like here, queen c2 and rook e8, and in that game I played knight e5, to which he reacted badly. I mean, my opponent here, he was called Legend 2014. Yeah, Dr. Nunn he took and went d4, which seems to be yeah, okay, or the best drive for black. I now have checked this a little bit, and I think that knight e5, while not being terrible, probably should be replaced by another move. Interesting ideas here for white are knight c3, for example. That's pretty interesting. After e5, c takes, knight b5 is basically winning for white. So he cannot do that. He has to take with a knight. And now white has some chances for an advantage. Simply because we have a kind of English opening, or also it's a bit like a reverse dragon, where black has played a pretty passive setup. Knight on d7, c6, and so on. White has chances for a slight advantage here. You have the two center pawns that are not yet in effect, but they are useful to have, and they might come up later. Another good idea is to just go d4 and transpose into some kind of Grunfeld structure, where black is committed to early moves that are not super active. Probably this is better in terms of fighting for an opening advantage. What I did is okay, but it's not very powerful, let's say. Yeah, what else did I get? Let me check with white. Yeah, I got one g3 f5, bishop g2, knight f6, and I went c4. Of course, white can also play d4 and just transpose to a Leningrad Dutch. Again, here d4 is a Leningrad Dutch. g7, d3. I went with d3 castles e4. This Botvinnik setup. Yeah, this is a pretty good line against the Dutch if you are not committed to d4. It leads to a position that is more of a strategic nature. In the game, black went with that, taking and going e5, and got a decent position. Yeah, like d6, h3, bishop e6, knight d5. And now the interesting move, knight to d7, knight d7 to c5. Yeah, I still think that white has a slight advantage in this position because white's enjoying more space, has the knight on d5, and it's not so clear what black's plan is. In the game, I misplayed it. I misplayed the advance on the queen side and gave black an excellent position. It was kind of an up and down experience. But in general, I think that against the Dutch setup here, the Leningrad Dutch setup, let's say with g6, this d3, e4 can be an interesting way to get a unique position and not transpose into a regular Dutch. That also can easily come up from the English opening, c4, e5. If we, like here, this is how he played. And it could easily be, in a different move order, that black starts with e5, knight c6, g6, and later on f5. This is in fact the main move order there. Yeah, what else did I get? Of course, I got d5, the g3, d5, main move. And I played bishop g2 and knight f3 here. Can be transpositional. However, bishop g2, of course, allows e5. As I earlier said, I don't regard that to be particularly great for white. You can play d3 and c4, but probably knight f3 is the somewhat more ambitious choice, just preventing e5. I got one game, which was interesting, the first one in this session, where black went f6, after which after d4 we had some kind of a reversed Grunfeld type of position. In fact, here quite often it gets to be a reversed Grunfeld. Knight c6, d4, for example, is quite a good line for white. It's nothing overwhelming if black knows what he's doing, but it's quite nice, especially if black is not knowing what he's doing. For example, the reversed Grunfeld proper is rather dangerous for black because the extra tempo is quite relevant in the fight against the center. It is very transpositional, this reversed Grunfeld. For example, after knight f6, castles e6, c4, we can easily get a Catalan opening or a Queen's Gambit Tarrasch. So g3 is a super transpositional move, especially if white is playing somewhat ambitiously and not just playing for like d3, g3, some kind of schematic approach. If he plays ambitiously, it is theoretical. It's not a non-theoretical line. I also got this g6, no, sorry, c6, bishop g2, g6, castles, bishop g7 when I went c4. Yeah, that's okay. Interesting way to play, and they took it on c4. That was one of the games that I lost quite badly. I went a4 in that game. I didn't know that line at all. I went a4, knight a3, and we got a very strange position. We had this thing. It was a very weird game. Here, which was completely unclear. I checked that a bit, and it seems that white maybe should go for knight a3. It's not exactly on the forefront of theory here, this line. It's very rare, but knight a3 is maybe a better choice, trying to get it back. Black has to be very cautious with stuff like that. Yeah, for example, this is a way to play against that. If he covers it like in the game with bishop e6, now knight g5 is a much better alternative, as here I even can go back if I want. Yeah, even the capture on d5 is a better version compared to the game, because a4 is not really necessary in that sequence of moves. Yeah, I mean, here in the game we had the same thing with knight f6 and a4 inserted. No, a4 and a4 is kind of pointless here. Better is knight h3, however. So I think knight a3 here is the better choice compared to a4 probably. White can maybe fight for a little something. It's nothing brilliant, but it is definitely okay. The other thing that I got here with d5 was I got this kind of thing. Here I got that 2 times. Of course, as I said, transpositional. This is the Catalan, but b3 is transposing into the Reti. And I got one game there where they played with a5 and c6. I was it was like that, a3, b5, and in the game I was a bit skeptical about that setup and said that it probably weakens the queen side and it's not that great for black. I checked it a little bit, and it seems that this is playable for black. Doesn't seem to be any problem there with it. It does weaken the queen side a little bit, but white has no real way forward. Black seems to be fine. It might be that white has to improve somewhere. The easiest approach is, of course, to just go to the Catalan with d4, or let's say after a5, maybe then d4. But they have a4. I don't know if that's so great. Well, it's an interesting way for black to approach that, this a5 move. After knight c3, there's also d4. That's something to be aware of. Knight b5 maybe, interesting line. Knight c6, e3, that also might be an idea. I didn't look too closely here. In the second game that reached this position, black took on c4. Where is that actually? No, he went, no, sorry, he started with that. I went bishop b2, and now he took on c4. I think this is just not very accurate. White seems to maintain a slight advantage after that move. It seems better to play just knight c6, and here white mostly goes with e3, preparing queen e2, after which black has the choice between playing d4, leading some kind of reversed Benoni, or going with the capture and play something like sorry, the capture is a bit early. I think b6, yeah, b6, queen e2, and now maybe taking, or do you start with bishop b7, or like this, somehow like this, and now taking, yeah, so taking at one point. This is how black normally plays that. The early capture that was played in my game here has some drawbacks. It gives white a good diagonal and an extra center pawn. That is back, but it's still relevant and can come up later. I went with knight e5, and I think this is a good simple continuation that will always give white a slight edge. It's just that the bishop on g2 is a strong piece. b-file gets relevant later. White is a little bit better here. This is not a great way to play for black. Capture away from the center. It's just violating, it's just violating, it's too stupid to do that. Just violating this rule that you should not capture away from the center. I know that I showed a line earlier where black is doing that, but in that he gets some counterplay on the d-file, and against d3. White already had played e3 here, yeah, in the comparable position, just to make the comparison, like here. Come on. Yeah, here taking is actually giving black ideas, yeah, on d3 or on the d pawn. If white plays d4, we get hanging pawns and an entirely different structure. So that's a better way to play. Yeah, in general, I liked my white opening results. It was okay. It's something that I have some experience in. I have a fair share of experience with this move order, which is quite often leading to the same thing. Yeah, as I said, quite often after 1g3, white wants to play knight f3 early on to make sure that e5 is not coming. So this is a pretty good way to open. So let's look at the black side now. I'm going to turn this around. Yeah, I played g6, bishop g7 in all black games, and it's quite surprising that yeah, maybe not, but it wasn't so clear beforehand for me that it would turn out to be like that. I had really good results, which is probably also due to the opponent's playing strength, but I had really good results in these positions where white was not going c4. Yeah, like here or here. In those I actually scored close to 100% and got really nice positions out of the opening. It was really very satisfying. Yeah, so have a look. Let's start with that. I had very bad results with c4, yeah, included. Let's start with that. I had one game here where it went with c5. c3 takes here. This is actually quite comparable to what we had with colors reversed. Yeah, if you remember, we had this thing with g3, bishop g2, c4 attacking the center. This is the same thing, colors reversed, one tempo down. And here again, I think white should think about advancing. This is also what he did in the game here, my opponent. I kind of screwed up this in the printout. Where was that? Where is it? Ah, here is it. Yeah, okay. Bishop here, and I think he played it in a bit slow fashion there with white. Probably bishop b5 check is a good idea here. He did not go for that. He played something rather passive. Bishop e3 is what he did, and then bishop e2. This is better, I think. Giving black this problematic pawn structure, and then trying to maybe play for this square or for possible pressure on the pawn. This is, I think, the way to go for white, but it did not happen. He played this kind of thing. Bishop here. Knight c6, bishop e2 I took, and went e6. And here I think black is already in quite good shape because the d4 pawn is in target and it gets to be attacked quite often. Also with f6. The bishop on f3 is the bishop that basically constitutes the bishop pair. White's extra bishop in a way compared to a knight, but it's not a good piece. It just looks at black's pawns and does nothing. Black is very okay in this position. So this was a good opening result. However, I think far more critical here is this check.
Check.
It's also scoring quite well for white. So this is probably something that makes this line a bit tricky. A thing that also should be mentioned is that here white has a good continuation with d takes c5. That's actually the best move. I just played this for variety's sake, but I was risking quite a bit here because this is a good line for white. If you play the white side of this, and you can easily get this position from various move orders. Also, let's say you're an e4 player with white and you play like this and they go here, you have the same position. It can happen. And taking is actually quite good for white. The problem is that if black wants to get the pawn back, he has to check. And after the move knight to a3, black has very serious problems to equalize. One key point is that the pawn snatch here is not playable. And black is actually losing almost by force. That's a terrible position. Yeah? There's a check threatened here, and your queen is trapped. Yeah, knight c3 is basically shutting out the queen. There's also other moves that are strong, but knight c3 is the best one. Intending bishop, castles, bishop b2, and the queen is trapped. It's really completely busted. Yeah. So black cannot take on c3, and this means that he has to deal with the point bishop e3 and knight b5, and black already has to make some kind of has to be very careful and not to lose quickly. It's a rather fishy line. It was a very risky thing to try out here. I had a couple of games where this happened, and now white went for various things. There was no game with f4, surprisingly. This formerly main move was not played against me. And I'm not going to review it now. Black has mostly the choice between staying within modern territory, like with a6, b5, very sharp, or knight f6, going back into a more conservative thing, like this is the Pirt's defense, and a bit more solid than a6, b5. At least it develops a piece. I got this a number of times and had excellent results with it, with this a6 move, intending b5. I looked it up, and it seems that white's most popular move here is actually a4, and I have to say I like that best. Yeah, why not just prevent b5? a4 makes sense. In case of b6, which I tried in one game, did I start with that actually? Yeah, I started with b6. In that case, white always has this a5 idea in the mix somewhere. Black is setting up the hippopotamus. I got one game like that, and I think this is one of the better hippopotamus setups. Black is only very slightly worse with his space disadvantage, but in fact, due to the somewhat tame white setup, it seems that he gets his hippopotamus setup in the first place and maybe can get some central counterplay in. So I don't think that the hippopotamus in that form is a huge problem for black. It's just it's a matter of taste. It's not everybody's cup of tea, of course. I got one game where they allowed this thing and played a3. Here I think black has a really nice position, and it showed very nicely how good black's or how rewarding black setup can become if white is playing in a meek way. There was one game where they really played like bishop here, and I got in a quick c5. Let me have a look there. Where was that? b5, a3, bishop b7, bishop here, knight d7, queen d2, c5, bishop e2 takes, bishop took, strangely enough, knight f6. And here black has an excellent position. Yeah, I have this Sicilian-like setup without any tempo loss. Yeah, c5 was played in one move, taking on d4, and white has a very unambitious setup. Yeah, h3, a3. Yeah, and well, in the open Sicilian, black does have an extra center pawn and play on the c file. Yeah, there's this famous saying: if black is equalized in the Sicilian, then he's better. It's by Tal, and it's a very decent thing to say, because quite often it is like that. If black is not worse out of the opening, like he gets killed right away in the Sicilian, quite often he is better because of his strategic advantages of the extra center pawn and c-file play, flexibility, and so on. And here we have a Sicilian type of position, type of structure, where white setup doesn't make much sense. And I won that quickly due to a blunder, but black is already in very, very nice shape. I had a comparable game actually, where white started here I played f3, a6, bishop e3, knight d7, queen d2, b5, and now white went knight h3. Yeah, this is in fact played quite a bit. It's not a rare move. In comparison, I thought that g4 or h4 is more interesting, just playing in a more aggressive fashion. Still angling for long castling is more ambitious. He went in my game, he went like this. It's this. I was kind of surprised. I actually found games with that by grandmasters, and I think they played it okay. I'm sorry, actually here this I found, and there were games where white played with a quick a4. This is in fact far more interesting than the other setup that we had, because here with f3 white center pawn is supported, and with a4 white is trying to make use of the fact that black's advanced pawns can also be a weakness. This is a playable option for white. In the game that I had, he played far too passively like that. And after this, I again with castles, d5, e5, I got a very nice game out of it. So this c5 approach combined with g6 can lead to very nice versions of the Sicilian if white is not playing very, very ambitiously. Okay, let me look at my printout there. What else did I get? Yeah, it was like that. I think that's all of the pure e4 positions. Yep. Let's now look at the more d4, c4 like positions. I got this. Okay, once I had one game with that, and I checked that. This is actually very nice for black. I mean, not very nice. It's a bit strong. Yeah, it's not that black is clearly bad or anything, but this somewhat slowish build-up with d4, knight f3, g3 it is not ambitious, and with c5 black very quickly gets a nice game. I had this in one game and was very, very okay. I really liked my position there. I won that game quite quickly, which was not necessary. Of course, white is not clearly worse or anything, but in general, I think black can be very satisfied here with the outcome of this opening, as white has played his knight quite a bit. Black has a extra center pawn and a good open diagonal there with the bishop on g7. I think this is already quite okay in terms of equalization. I actually found games where black quite quickly pushed h5 in this position. It's quite a funny idea, going for h4. Yeah, it's a way to make use of the fact that black has not committed to any castling yet, and yeah, h4, sometimes even queen a5, h5 is in. It's interesting and quite active. This seems to be an argument against those slowish build-ups. In fact, also the London system against this g6, bishop g7 is relatively meek, as a quick c5, queen b6 is okay. Amongst others, there's also a d6, knight d7, e5 kind of setup where the knight is still back there. So against g6, bishop g7, this queen pawn openings without c4 lose lots of sting. I got this a number of times and had my fair share of problems with it. One reason was that I think actually the best move here for black is knight f6, just going to the king's Indian, but I felt I should stay within the modern defense kind of territory. So I tried other moves, but I didn't fare well, and I think it's mostly, I mean, it's due to my not very, my bad play, but it's also not that great. There's bishop g4 that has been played a bit as an alternative, but ultimately it mostly leads to positions where black gives up his bishop pair and has to show compensation for it. I got one game against Mr. Olegas, where I went knight c6 here, c5 takes. Here white is just slightly better. It's just like that. It's an open position. He has the bishop pair and better central control. White is better. That wasn't very nice, and I looked it up. I think maybe e6, knight e7, trying to go d6, d5 is better, but still I would like to be white here in comparison. The bishop pair is just quite good. Bishop g4 is not particularly great. In another game I went here, c5, and got this thing against Grandmaster Bachmann from Paraguay. Here I got a very bad Benoni type of position, which he, however, screwed up really quickly. I went here, and he got in f4 later. I had a good position. I checked that actually this here has been played by some good players, and now f5. The best player I found there was Grandmaster Malakhov from Russia. He's a 2700 player. He's not a very active player, so maybe you don't know him, but it's a very strong GM, 2007 something all of the time. This is interesting. It's very comparable to the Jinshi Indian, where black also takes on c3, an opening that I would have tried, but I didn't get the proper move order to play it really, I think. Interesting. Here black has damaged white's pawn structure. Can try to play against those pawns. It's a bit risky. Two knights against two bishops is always a strategic risk, but white's pawn structure is quite damaged. Maybe this is better than what I did. My position here wasn't great. I went here, just played, let's say, normally, and here I was worse. I mean, if I just sit around, I'm worse, and after e6 and now g4 or f5, I was worse. Yeah, that is not really great. I got this also, and tried a couple of things. I tried e5 2 times, and I lost both games, but one was very good for me. One was this, which is not great really. This is just leading to a good position for black, or let's say a very good equalizing chances position. My opponent played this move, which is just terrible, and I got a winning position very early with this, and this kind of thing. I had a fantastic position there. White should play here and go back, and here black is okay, but it's nothing terrible for white. Maybe should go to f2, I don't know, but far better here are other moves, like knight f3, knight e2, or d5. d5 was played against me by Grandmaster Zashi Kiran, and after a5, bishop d3, here we got this position, and I went for bishop h6. I checked that this position has been played a couple of times, and with hindsight, I mean, bishop h6 was rubbish anyway, but with hindsight, I probably should start with something like that and only later commit to do if I want to go bishop h6 or f5. It's a fairly normal position that is quite comparable to a King's Indian. If I play knight f6, we actually would transpose to a King's Indian, but probably not the most precise form for black. And it's a bit, if you have to play knight f6, you should have played the King's Indian in the first place. I'd like to get in f5 here somehow quicker. Yeah, here white seems to have a slight advantage no matter what, but it's not the end of the world. Bishop h6 and this queen h4, what I played, really wasn't that great. I got one game with that, and here I tried two things. I had one with that sorry, with that setup, after which my opponent played bishop g5. He actually suffered a very bad loss, but this is probably due to the fact that I went knight e7, which in itself is not terrible, but I really played badly afterwards. It seems that the more King's Indian-like move knight gf6 is much better. It seems to be very okay, and here white doesn't have anything special. In fact, the early bishop g5 might even be questionable in some cases. Yeah, let's say like here, and now bishop e3. I have this early jump to g4. Yeah, this would have been much better than my knight e7, which I already suspected during the game. I had one game that went like this, and here I was really surprised by my survey, my research after the game. I always thought that this should be okay for black because you get in f5 so early, but it's not quite clear if this is really helping black. In the game I played f5, this, and after knight f6 takes, I played this, which essentially loses after bishop h5. I somehow won that game, but it didn't really relate to the opening. It seems that I have to play knight f5 here, which looks a bit wrong, let's say, yeah, because you give up the e4 square, but in return you get d4 for your knight. So it seems to be not that bad at all. In fact, black's results here have been quite okay, even though it was just a couple of games. Black can try to start with h6, trying to prevent knight g5, and only now go f5, but again the capture seems good because after pawn takes, knight h4, this check is very annoying. So this early f5 seems to be quite ambitious. Okay, you can do it, but you have to take with the knight. It seems that any try to recapture with the pawn is just not solid enough. It just doesn't seem to work. Yeah, I had much tougher games when the pawn was on c4. I think I looked at all of the games there from the black side. Or did I miss one? No, I think I got everyone. I made a little printout here to not forget things. So the issue sometimes here with this move order is that the lines that are not the King's Indian, yeah, knight f6, are a bit tricky sometimes to play. Yeah, here there's also d takes d5. Not the end of the world, but it is possible. Yeah, here, yeah, for example, it's not so clear what black's supposed to do here. Yeah, and I tried knight d7. Okay, but knight d7, bishop g5 was not critical. Knight c6 is possible, but I think honestly, probably just going to the King's Indian is the best option. Yeah, okay, I hope you enjoyed this overview of the modern defense here as black and 1 g3 with white. Yeah, which is in both cases is highly transpositional and flexible. That's what's nice about those opening moves. You can vary your play a little bit, and it's not very much in the focus of current theoretical discussions. So quite often you probably will know more than your opponent. Can be a good alternative, and I have really good experiences, especially from the white side of if we go back there, of these kind of things. I always started with knight f3 really, because I don't want to see e5 early on. And I think this can be played quite successfully if you specialize in it, have some concrete ideas against lines. If you just play like g3, d3 and have no idea, you're just giving up on any hope of an advantage for white. But if you play that with some ambition and have some idea about positional possible transpositions, then you can really play it with quite good success, I think. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that review. Thanks for watching.